Welcome to Lovesick, the podcast where we dive into health, wellness, and relationships and their impact on the world today. Come be a part of the discussion and join our community by following us on YouTube, Instagram, and listening wherever you get your favorite podcast. Enjoy the show.
Hey, welcome back to Lovesick Podcast. I'm Michael Fishman with Jada Ford-Farrell and Dot McGuire. And we have a special guest joining us today, poet-author Antonio Damone Robinson, who is going to really school us and bring us up to speed on kind of a combination of some crises here, health crises, but also some mental, personal stuff. Welcome to the show. Welcome to Lovesick Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me here. That's such a pleasure. I'm very grateful to be here and proud of you all for having your show.
Absolutely. I guess what I really want to start with is, we originally started talking about kind of the opioid crisis.
Right.
Take us through kind of your view and kind of the things that you really resonate with that.
Well, in regards to the opioid crisis, to me, in 2018 is when I stumbled upon it. There was this Time magazine that I saw and I looked at the article, and it shows this guy standing there putting a needle in his arm, and just made me want to open it up. So as I opened it up and I started to read, the first thing that jumped out to me was in 2016, 64,000 people died from drug overdose. And it was more than the Afghanistan, Vietnam, and Iraq war combined.
Wow.
Isn't it? And the numbers are staggering. Like that's
Yes.
mind-blowing. If we sit for a moment and we've heard people talk about the impact of the wars.
Yes.
We've heard people march against them over the course of history. We've heard people talk about this. Almost nobody is really consistently talking about the opioid crisis in this country, and it hasn't gotten smaller.
No, it's only grown. In fact, from 96 all the way up until about now, CDC has us at about 1 million deaths.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
1 million deaths.
and I think so many people at home, there's lots of different layers to this because you talked about the guy shooting up, and that's more in the heroin area, and that's people look at that as drug users, but the opioid crisis is more than just people who are using street drugs. We're talking about Oxycontin, we're talking about fentanyl, we're talking about prescription drugs, we're talking about the abuse of kind of all of these things, and a lot of them start out as prescriptions or start out as a legitimate use.
Right. And we're not just talking about druggies, drug abusers. We're talking about somebody who is a pilot, a valedictorian, an Olympic champion, right? A doctor, a lawyer. We're talking about somebody who is dealing with chronic pain. And all of a sudden, their doctor in a white coat, who they think is their friend, prescribes them something called Oxycontin, the miracle drug, the elated drug, to help them heal from their pain. And they get addicted. 'Cause the thing about addiction is it's not just a biological thing. It's also a psychological thing. So there's a reward centers in your neocortex of your brain. And so anytime someone's shooting up heroin, methamphetamines, or the Oxycontins, they feel rewarded for it, biologically and psychologically. So think about how hard it is for them to just say, all right, I got to stop. I need to go into treatment. I need to quit. Easier said than done.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things that I think shocks people because, like you said, it usually starts as a prescription. So most people don't realize they have a problem.
No.
They're taking it for pain or post-surgery or post-incident or whatever, and then all of a sudden you wake up one day and all those pleasure centers in your brain, all of these connectors have been built, and we've built this connection, and all of a sudden your body is craving this thing, and now you're trying to stop, and you don't really know how, and your body does not want to. And this is the kind of ongoing crisis of addiction, and it does not care about demographics. It does not care about your gender. It does not care about your preference. It does not care about your background or what your, race, gender, color cuts across everything.
It's completely indiscriminate.
Yeah. And it's devastating communities and it's devastating families.
Right. And I mean, you talk about that Olympic athlete or that valedictorian or that, executive who had this great life.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, their whole life just spirals out of control. Their family falls apart. They lose their kids. They lose their wife. They end up on the street. And in the dead of winter, they're okay with 10 blankets in the snow underneath the bridge. I can make it by with that. So here it is. You had this person who was all the way up here, and now they hit rock bottom. And the healthcare infrastructure in America is in desperate need of reform. When somebody hits rock bottom,
Mm-hmm.
they're a drug user. They may as well be the scum of the earth. They may as well be just a regular homeless person on the street. And that's the saddest part about it all.
That is sad.
Yeah, and I think it's the way we look at people. Like, we define homeless people. We assume that there's a chemical dependency.
Right.
And the truth is, that's often not the case. There's lots of people who are homeless that don't have it. But the people who do have it, there's no support structure for you to get clean. And that's the biggest problem is, when you're in a house and you're in a family, you have a support structure. You have other people to help care for you. When you're on the street, detoxing can be literally deadly because you are not in a position to defend yourself, to protect yourself. Sometimes people continue or start drug usage out there that they didn't have before. And it's a really complex thing. I had 2 brief stints of homelessness. So that's a personal thing for me. And this one hits home because I've lost a bunch of coworkers. In 2002, I lost a really dear friend, and it totally changed my life. And it was very interesting because his loss actually kind of really triggered me to go back to chasing my dreams in a different way, right? And so it's how you take these things is what I would say is that's the other part is what does this crisis make you do? And I think this is one of the beautiful things about you, Antonio, is I believe people get 2 choices in trauma or chaos, right? There are the people who keep the scar, and then there are the people who take it and it becomes their mission. And I think you get a choice, right? And it kind of goes to a mental health aspect of this is like you go, okay, I experienced this, so I don't want somebody else, or I'm going to share my wisdom and my knowledge. And we don't get to pick where people hit rock bottom. I think that's the other part for people who have addiction is until they decide what rock bottom is. Rock bottom is wherever you choose. And a lot of people skip across the bottom or dig deeper along the way. And that's the devastating part for families is because you're going, I'm trying to get you help, or I'm trying to get you support. I'm trying to help you get clean. But until that person decides this is it for me, or until they can kind of start to get their brain in a place where it can start to receive the information and they start to understand either why they're taking it or what this addiction is doing to them. Till that time comes, it's almost impossible. And I think families blame themselves, so then they hide it. And the hiding makes it easier for people to continue, and it makes it harder for people to get help and treatment.
Yeah. And I also think like when we look at the raw data, like a million dead, 75% of the overdoses in 2021 were a synthetic drug related, opioid related.
Yep.
We miss the true empathy and emotion that's correlated with it. Because we don't have any boots on the ground. Now, the people that like a Tim Nolan, I read about Tim Nolan in a really good book about the crisis in America. It's called Raising Lazarus. Tim Nolan would drive his Prius during COVID time, meet somebody who's an addict at a Burger King, and get them harm reduction treatment, syringes, fentanyl test strips. Because you have people sometimes that will get into recovery, get the Naloxone, right, to help them get off because it's a dual thing. It's a balance. They could be in recovery for 10 years and have a relapse. But with the drug czars involved in heroin, cutting it with fentanyl, that person who hasn't been doing heroin for a long time who has a relapse and says, oh, well, I'm just going to have a little casual poke, right?
Nothing's like just a casual poke, though. That's for sure.
Right, because they forget that they have to lower the milligram of the fentanyl in there, and it's higher, and it kills them.
Yeah, I mean, this is personal for me because, like, I had an adopted son who tried some drugs, and they had fentanyl, and that was the end. He's one of like 8 people. I don't believe the guy who sold that was charged, and I don't believe the place they got it from was ever tracked down. So you got 8 families who now have a hole that you can't fill. And you cannot express to people what that pain's like. And it's one of the places, like, I wish people would understand, like, people go, oh, it's just recreational drugs, or it's not that big a deal, or pot's not that big a deal. Yeah, but a lot of pot has fentanyl in it now.
Wow, I didn't know that.
There's
I didn't know
stuff
I
is
had
being
no
laced with all
clue.
kinds of stuff. There's a
believe
lot
that,
of
though.
stuff on the street now. It's not, these are not the drugs people were doing in the 60s and 70s, right?
Maybe even not in the 90s.
Right. And this is also one of these things, is what it takes to become addicted now, because we're adding so many chemical additives. Sometimes people try one time.
Yes.
And that's, like, it goes back to the brain chemistry
Yes,
thing, right?
That's
Like,
true.
like, you may not realize how addictive your personality or your brain chemistry is, and it may only take one time, and you cannot stop. And I had a friend who worked in a workplace where drugs were pretty pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of this expected thing that pretty much that's what they did together.
Mm.
Well, he tried it one time. Everybody else could come in and out, right? And so
Right.
they could give their body a chance to kind of have that spacer to recover.
Yeah.
He couldn't. He was addicted.
Man.
And we lost him. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've lost so many people along the way. I mean, being in entertainment, artists by nature, I think this is the nature. I mean, you wrote this book of poetry. So you're a big, strong guy. You've played sports. We kind of talked about that before we got on. But a poet, an actor, creative people, all of us here, that means you got a gentle heart somewhere inside you, right? Which also means you have a really active mind.
Yep.
Mhm.
And that means
Mhm.
you are prone to big feelings and a
Yes.
lot of synapses firing at the same time.
Yes.
And drugs are going to really heighten that. And I used to tell kids, I was a high school coach for decades, and I used to tell people the problem with drugs is they work on some level, right? They work on your body. So that feeling you're having, that can be super addicting from the first moment.
Right.
And for people at home, like people listening to this, none of us are judging you,
Mhm.
but we want you to get the help. We want you to
Right.
understand the crisis, especially for young people,
Mm-hmm.
because that's the group that is becoming addicted at just a massive, unbelievable rate.
Yes.
And it's no longer, it's not the kids that are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exceptional ones. It's the high
I see.
achievers,
Yep.
it's the high level college athletes. It's they get tested during season, but out of season and out of these things,
Yep.
because they have so much pressure,
Right.
right? And drugs usually are used as an escape. And, this kind of goes to mental health, which I know is a big part of your book too. Is
Yeah.
like, and I know we all talk about, is one of the parts about mental health is, can you process the things that you're going through, right? Because people turn to these coping mechanisms, especially if they have scars or trauma.
Right.
There are other ways. But if you don't have that, or the people around you have addictions, or this is what you've seen in your life, or this is what's accessible to you, or film and television, which I work in, sometimes we show you in a film or a television, hey, this is how people experience this, and they had this amazing experience. We don't show them the number of people who try it and don't come home. And I think that's a painful lesson that
Yeah.
families learn the hard way.
I'm looking at Heartfelt.
Okay.
And first of all, I love the cover.
Oh, thank you
I
so
definitely
much.
love the cover.
That's
and-
all me right there.
Yeah, I love the cover. But what I want you to tell everyone is what prompted you to write this book, and what is it about?
Okay. What prompted me to write this book was an accident when I was playing basketball, playing sports. I was telling Michael about it earlier. I went to go and get a rebound in the men's league basketball game. I'm feeling hyped. And when I went to tip the ball and to corral it, right, this defender's behind me. My left leg is up like this. So my heel's in the air. He steps on it, drives it into the ground, and ruptures my left Achilles tendon. Snaps right there. By far, that's the worst basketball-related injury. And I've had some bad ones, like seeing this AC joint pop out and go back in, and then this one, and plus it, but that right there, where all I could do was move my toes.
And people don't realize you really almost can't move, right?
It's a non-weight bearing.
Oh my God.
And you feel the excruciating pain of heat in your foot and a Charlie horse in your calf muscle.
Ooh.
All right. So you're just dealing with a phenomenal pain. So I'm a little depressed. I'm down. I'm smoking some bud. I'm drinking this here.
Right.
And then I notice the doctor gives me these Oxycontins. So I take those.
Right. Yeah.
And here's how I have a lot of empathy for the people that are struggling with addiction, opioid use disorder or substance use disorder, is when I took that Oxycontin, none of the pain in my body, none of the other pain that I had affected me. Just felt a little bit of burning in the foot and in the Achilles. And after about 3 days, I said, you know what, Tony, this isn't going to be good for you.
Right.
This is higher than the best weed you've ever had. This is higher than acid or whatever you've tried. And so I got myself off of it right away. And I said, well, what else can you do? You're tired of Netflix. You're tired of Amazon Prime. What are you going to do, Tony? So Tony picked up books and he started reading. And so now he's ordering books on Amazon Prime, and he finds this book changed his whole life. Autobiography of a Yogi, written by Paramahansa Yogananda, a very spiritual man. He taught me about self-actualization, self-realization, but most importantly, the power of meditation. So once I started meditating, I started to have visions in my mind's eye. Because the pineal gland, once you get it right, like you said, when you start doing your breathing and you create that mechanical pressure, you end up creating this electromagnetic field around the pineal gland, a reverse electromagnetic field, a torus field is what they call it. The pineal gland, I don't know if you guys know this, is actually a transducer. So there are frequencies going through the air at all times, just like going into the TV. But then when you click your specific channel, you get an image. The same thing happens in your mind. And I saw this. Not exactly like this.
Right.
But enough for me to say, all right, I'm going to go with this. I'm going to run with it. And just reading different authors and reading Paramahansa's book, I became a fan of him, and I became a fan of authors. And I said, you know what? I can do this.
Right.
I've been following athletes my whole life. Why don't I follow these people? And that's what I did. So it was a great change, a traumatic, tumultuous time in my life where I was dealing with financial debt, and I was struggling with alcohol a little bit more and weed a little bit more. And then I got onto the Oxycontins, turned into the greatest opportunity in my life because I worked on my mental health.
Right.
And I got off of the drugs. I basically treated myself through meditation, through writing, through finding other outlets, going on walks, going to the beach. It's your favorite thing to do.
Oh,
right?
sure
Go to the
is.
beach.
Mine too. Sometimes I take therapy calls from my therapist on the beach.
Yes.
Because literally I'm double like.
That's therapy.
It's just, it's amazing. It's
Yes.
the power of, and I think, and not to cut you off, but I think it's like, just the natural things around you can be very healing.
Oh, yes.
And like you said, for like walks, like just to clear your, like, I love when I'm in a state of like, I'm mad about something or upset about something, like I literally go for a walk because then you're in your own feelings rather than, loving wine or something like that. It's like, but it's true, but it's like, what is the alternative for me to not make myself feel worse afterwards?
Right.
But like, how can I just be in tune with myself. I'm not great at meditating. I'm working on it. I actually meditate with my children. I do that with them like every other night because I'm trying to get them in the habit.
Yeah.
Because mental health is very huge. Huge advocate for mental health, and I know we're going to go into that more. But I do that with my kids. But you will see me like I will just be like, I'm going to go walk, or I'm going to go to the beach, or even I just sit there in my car at the beach because I just love the waves and water. And then I'll be like, okay, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and I'm like, all right, let's go back home, and here I am. So I think the powerful thing is just things around you, but not everybody.
But that's true because she will call me and she will say, hey, are you home? I said, I'm at the beach.
She does.
I said, if you want to go over, I'll meet you there. But I'm at the beach right now. I'm taking my walk because I like the ocean.
Yeah.
I don't know, like the ocean is like medicine for me. You know, it's like I'm there. I can think. I take deep breaths. You know, I smell it. I smell the water. It just does something to me.
Yeah.
You know, it's better than a pill.
Yes.
You know, and it's like, it's my calm. Like when I go there, I just feel calm. And I'm like you, it's hard for me to meditate because I have like all these things going through my mind.
That's why you need to meditate.
That's why I need
That's
to.
exactly. That's why I'm practicing it too. Like practicing
But how do you get to that point where you can just focus and not have 5 or 10 things that you're thinking about at the same time? I think I have a hard time focusing. That's my issue.
I struggle with the same thing. But I listen to Yoda from Star Wars.
Okay.
Quiet your thoughts. You must.
Right.
You have to sit there and allow the free ways to go through your mind, even the negative thoughts, these angry thoughts. I'm not talking about good thoughts going through my head all the time. I'm talking about some very angry things that I got to address.
And I
got to deal with.
I love that you're saying this because I think this is huge. Antonio, because like everybody pictures like it's serene and it's perfect. It's like, no. People have dark, horrible thoughts.
It's true.
Yes.
Good people, healthy people.
Yes.
Like we've all dealt with stuff. And even if you hadn't, if you turn on the news for 5 minutes, if you look at what's going on in the world, there are going to be some negative thoughts. So I think that's a huge thing because everybody acts like, oh, you just sit down and like everything goes away and you're like serene and it's no. I'm supposed to welcome those thoughts. I'm supposed to sit through them. I'm supposed to acknowledge that thought and realize, I'm not going to act on that good thing, right?
Right.
I'm going to let that one go. Hey, that one's not necessarily really me, right? Or that's not really something that I really need to carry. And that's part of this, right? Is like, it's not that you're supposed to have no thoughts. And I think that's where people, I think, get lost early on in meditation. It's not that you don't have any thoughts. It's that you recognize them and then you recognize what they are, that you're not attached to them. And you can just kind of move away.
Exactly.
That's a really good.
That's
that's
really good.
Because it's not about, and I think, the way you wrote the book is a really good example of internally healing.
Yes.
Right? Your own self-healing. And I think that's for people listening to Lovesick, I mean, that's one of the reasons we really wanted to have you on is because it's this concept, right? How do you fix the opioid crisis in this country? A big part of it starts with not making that the only way we deal with things, right? You got the medicine and it worked. And there was probably a point where it was really beneficial. But we've become so dependent on, we'll take something, drink something, get an outside source to appease that or to numb or mask the pain, right? And you almost did the opposite. You almost said, okay, that's working, but that's not working for who I want to be.
Exactly.
Right? And that's what I love about your story is you go, no, I'm going to go deeper, right? I'm going to be something better. And it's so amazing is it turned into this beautiful work of art that now you're sharing with the world.
Yeah.
That might heal somebody else.
Exactly. That's the premise
of
why I wrote it, to help other people heal. Because I can't be everywhere all at once.
Right.
But my book can.
My
audio book can.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody could listen to one line, like so many books have done for me, and change their whole perspective on life. Say, okay, well, maybe I'll drink some purified water, go on a walk barefoot where the sun is just right so I can get that photosynthesis in and meditate and be at peace. And you know what? All of a sudden, I have those bad thoughts anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I'm not feeling that way anymore. I'm feeling revitalized. I'm feeling rejuvenated.
Yep.
It's there are simple things that we need to do, but so many people in our society, since it's low vibration, high frequency, like you talked about, you turn on the news, and you see a program, and it's, oh, this car accident here. Oh, the interest rates are going up here.
Yeah.
It's just constant stress.
Yeah.
It's depressing.
Right?
Well,
So you can't look at that.
It's shocking, right? And the goal is to shock you.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is we were never designed as beings to be shocked all the time.
No way.
Right? Like it feels to me a little bit like we're doing this like electric prodding to ourselves all the time. And we expose ourselves to it by social media at times. Like it's so interesting. Like if you want to know if you're having good or negative thoughts, check your social media and do the search thing. like if you go on Instagram, it's showing what you already looked at. So if you look at that for a moment, you go, yeah, that's not like, go through a breakup and then look at your social media and watch how all these like relationship things. Go through some debt and watch everything is debt relief and all this stuff. Like it tells you kind of, because it shows you, it's a mirror in a way. It shows you what you already were ingesting, right?
Wow.
And I don't think we look at it that way. And we think we're taking in outside stimuli. Really, we're prodding ourselves with the stimuli that they think we want or that is already getting a reaction out of us. And that's a health thing. And I think, so there's this beautiful thing that happens, like you talked about with meditation, which is you're triggering and making a lot of those neurochemicals. I know people will say, look, you and I are two athletes, right? We're two guys who like go out and play tough and do all kinds of stuff. We're going to both tell you to go out and walk barefoot and like see the sun, and people are going to look at us.
I would have never done that.
Yeah, they're like, what are you talking
people
about?
Going, that's kind of woo-woo. Like,
doing that,
right? You're going, what are these two guys talking about?
Yeah.
Right.
But I do it now.
Right. And
honestly.
I got to reading late, which is crazy because I worked in entertainment, read scripts every week, and all like we were talking about before we did the show is we were literally talking about authors, right?
Yeah.
And titles of books. If you told me even 15 years ago that that's what I would be doing, or that's the thing that would get us all excited, and like, I would have said, no, what sports team, what outside event, right? But the truth is, there's magic there, and you will fire those same synapses in your brain that those chemicals would have done, right? The glass of wine helps you relax in one sense.
Yes.
But it's temporary.
Mm-hmm.
True.
But I can go to that book. I can go to your book anytime I want.
Right.
Right? I can go for that walk most times, right? I can find a space for that.
Yeah.
I can sit for a moment and start to let some of the anger go or these other feelings. Like, look, I'm going to tell you right now, I've lost so many people. Like, I don't really talk about it a lot in public, but like, I've been to over 100 funerals.
Man.
I've lost so many people.
That is
I lived
heartbreaking.
through the AIDS epidemic, working in entertainment in the late 80s and early 90s. I watched people go through addiction. I've known a lot of military. I've known a lot of people who lost their lives that way. I lived through a bunch of gang violence as a teenager living in Compton. I lost a son. Like I mourn kids every day. I was a high school coach. I lost players, lost a couple in a car accident, lost a couple in different. I'll tell people, grief is this beautiful gift.
Mm-hmm.
It's the only way I've been able to process it. It's a beautiful gift because it's the reminder of the love that you had that now you have to express in a different way.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, sitting and getting some calm, if you think I don't see faces of people, if you think that I don't get like, that there aren't dark thoughts that come in, or that I don't get angry about my son that I lost, or that the injustice that's going on in the world, of course I do. But it also gives me incredible peace. And look, when I look at those things, right, all of those things are markers for should be an addict, or should be like most people in the world would be coping with them in a different way. I was so lucky to be surrounded by people, to get to talk to people like this group who has wisdom about other ways of healing and other ways of health. Because otherwise that would have been the whole definition of me, and it would have been an ugly spiral. that as a former child star, probably everybody was waiting for anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I look at my peers. That's a perfect example. Is I look at some of those people and I think, man, if you'd had somebody who could have
Yeah.
turned to you and said, hey, just let's talk about authors. Let's sit quiet, or let's take the walk on the beach, or let's take the walk and see the sun and let some of that out. And if for our audience, if you're fighting a rare disease, you're fighting illness, this is the time for this too, is because you can start to rebuild your body and you can start firing those neurons in a different way. You can build different neural pathways.
Of course.
You
Yeah.
can start to heal yourself.
Mhm.
And you don't have to numb the pain. You almost can move past it in a weird way. Do you agree?
I agree. You align your chakras, right? So you got a job to do. You're trying to heal yourself. You're trying to create self-love for yourself. I can think of times in my life where I had this just disreputable self-hatred for myself. And I didn't know where it came from until I would have these deep meditation sessions, sitting in somewhat of a lotus pose. The lotus pose is really hard, by the way. I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah.
But
I'm not there. I'm not too proud to admit.
tears would come
Oh, my.
streaming down from my eyes, just tears. And all of a sudden I'd have a vision and okay, is because you watched your dad throw your mom through a shower at
Ooh.
age 5. You didn't get past that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
You're still dealing with that. That means as an adult, a grown man, I have unresolved childhood trauma,
Mhm.
which doesn't fix itself. It just accumulates over time. So you have all these different adults dealing with these unresolved childhood traumas. So where do they go to? The quick fix: alcohol,
Mhm.
illicit drugs.
Something to numb the pain, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Temporarily.
And this is something that we don't talk enough about in the
Mhm.
healthcare community but there are now studies that kind of trauma that you carry directly contributes to forms of diseases that they
Mm.
collect in parts of your body, and that they find that people with certain diseases, there's an overwhelming correlation to certain types of trauma, certain types of experience.
Wow,
And
that
it-
is phenomenal.
And as we're
I didn't know
starting
that.
to because it's early, right? Because
Yeah.
we've only been able to map the brain in the last 15 years, really, and we're still figuring it out, right? Like, we're such beautiful miracles. I think that's part of it, is can we acknowledge the miracle part of it, right? That we don't understand it all. But we're just starting to figure out how all these things come together, and that inner child, right, that you're talking about, the trauma you face, and sometimes people don't realize the trauma they're inflicting on you, right?
Right.
That fight that you don't see the resolution of as a kid, the physical violence that people see on a regular basis that rarely is expressed or shared.
Mm-hmm.
What you said is so valuable. It accumulates in you, right?
Yes.
It sits there until you can go and, like, it is human nature to be
Mhm.
somewhat center focused, right?
Yeah.
So the first thing kids do is they say, why wasn't I good enough? Or why didn't I stop it? Right? Like, there's all these, I'm not enough. I don't have value. I was abandoned, because all the key core wounds are all the same for most people. They're just slightly different shaped. And that's part of this, is like, can you tap into that to start to heal? But if you think there isn't a biological component that then starts to express itself through, because I hear people use the term dis-ease as opposed to disease, right?
Mm.
And it starts to be that, is where does that, if we know it's passed on genetically, and we're starting to
Right.
do these studies where we can see trauma from one generation is passed to another, that a mother can pass genetically to an offspring before they're even born, some of those markers for stress and high cortisol and pain, right?
Yeah.
There has to be a correlation too that has impact on some of these cumulative diseases that we get along the way, especially if your life is a repeated experience of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other part that we don't talk about enough is the familiar part of it. until you start to heal, you start to seek some of that same trauma. Like even sometimes sports, like sports is a great place to get your anger out, right? And people are like, yeah, you're being aggressive, right? Like good for you. Unless you're being too aggressive, right?
Right.
Unless
Or
that's
too competitive.
or too competitive.
There is such a
Yep.
thing.
Yeah.
There is such
or
a thing.
you're mistreating other people in the name of being competitive and being successful.
Mm-hmm.
You're just abusing people within the framework of a game, right?
Right.
So like as a coach, that's a tough line for me to walk because I need you to be aggressive. I need you to go all out. But are you doing it from a healthy place, or like is this the place you act out some of your trauma? Or like you said, did you see maybe your dad abuse your mom and the only place it was safe for you to go take that anger out was on the field? Well, I need you to channel it in a way that's healthy. I need you to be competitive in a way that's healthy as opposed to hurting somebody else or crossing lines or being out of control.
Or what I would do is go the opposite way. I would take that trauma and take personal responsibility for it and make it seem like I was the problem, right? And go into deep sadness and despair for something I didn't even do, but I thought I was the cause of it. I thought I was the culprit of it. You know, so I think self-love is truly an important foundation for everyone.
It
There are
really
a
is.
lot of people out here, they really don't love themselves. I mean, if you're binge drinking, eating a bunch of fast food, and you're working all the time, and your only obsession in life is money, like you don't really love yourself.
Mm.
Yep.
You're chasing things outside of yourself.
Mhm.
And that's the other thing that meditation taught me. It taught me about my inner world, and that you can create your inner world through just focusing on loving yourself, self-actualization, self-realization, finding meaning and purpose for your life from the inside out, not from the outside in.
Mm.
And I think that's a huge thing. I don't think enough people acknowledge what you just said. It's
Right.
so brave and it's so true. When you're a kid and you watch terrible things happen around you, some part of you feels like that's your fault. Especially really loving, kind. The more empathetic people are, I find the kindest people are the meanest to themselves most often.
Yeah.
And they beat on themselves.
Yeah.
And or if you grow up in an environment where everybody says negative things, right? That voice in your head, how much of that is really you?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Or how much of that,
No,
like
that's true.
If somebody said that to your friend, like I'm gonna
Right.
tell you right now, the things my brain has said to me, if they said them to, if any person tried to say that to any of the three of you, I'd be all over them, right? I would
Mhm.
come to your defense, but I'll say it to me in my head, right? And until
Yeah.
you get that in check, ooh, it's a dark place.
Exactly.
And it gets in the way of everything you want to do. And as a creative person, I'll tell you, as a creative person, that's a real dangerous thing because it will make you run to addictions and to ways you just want to shut the brain off, right?
Mhm.
Drugs, alcohol, pot, things that like I want a few minutes where I'm not aware of that voice, right?
Right.
And I think
Yeah.
that becomes people's
true.
release.
Yeah.
Also, like, chronic illness. If
Yes.
you're in chronic pain, it's so hard to find that space. And until you can start to do some of the mental work to kind of, they're doing all these studies now of people who do lots of meditation of physical pain reduce,
Yeah.
right? But that's hard to do.
Yes.
So if you're in chronic pain, I get people who smoke pot. Like I have no judgment. Like people who take Oxycontin, especially when it's prescribed post surgery, all this stuff,
Mhm.
I get it. But I love that you gave people a different look and a different choice. And not only did you choose a different path, it like birthed this whole different side of you, right?
Right. It revealed my higher self. I
Right.
mean, there are different
Yeah.
versions of ourselves that we have to get to. Like if you want to become something, you must, or if you want to be something, you must become what you desire to be.
Mhm.
So you're this sculpted, you're this mold, and you're being chiseled. You're chiseling yourself away along the way. Now there's trials, there's tribulations, there's adversity, but in the end, there's going to be this beautiful new version of you by pushing through all the adversity and all the pain.
Yeah, and loss. I think loss is one of those things that people don't know how to process. And I think
Yeah.
It's
letting
one of
go.
it's one of the biggest
Yeah.
parts of addiction, I think, for people is a lot of it either starts with a major accident like you had or a major loss.
Yeah.
And people fall into a spiral. And this is the other thing. We talk about depression as if it's like something wrong with you,
Mm-hmm.
or we define people by it and say, okay, you're depressed. And there's a lot of studies that say the first week or two after you get diagnosed with depression, usually there's an increase in positive emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And your brain actually makes better chemicals. But then afterwards, after about 3 or 4 weeks, dramatically there's a decline progressively because you start to see yourself as the diagnosis. And I think this is something, living with sarcoidosis, like
Right.
for you, like
Yeah.
understanding I have something I fight, but I am not my diagnosis. This
Right.
is something you say all the time, Doc.
Right.
Like I'm not the diagnosis. And maybe you
Right.
could speak to that, like learning to separate the two. Like this is something I deal with, but that's not who I
Yeah.
am.
I mean, I had to do that because if I actually sat around and thought about what my illness is, I mean, I wouldn't try. I wouldn't try to be positive or think about other ways to challenge myself to not think about me living with this disease. But on the other hand, it's like this disease chose me,
Okay.
so it's like, all right, so I have this, now what? Will I sit and just like die just because I have it and not fight? Or do I say, okay, I have this illness. It changed my life. Now I have to have this is my new norm because I have to live with it, and that's just how it is, and once I think about that daily and do the right things for my body, because I will go out and take that walk and go to the beach, because for me, that's healing. I don't want to take 15 pills or 20
Right.
pills. I want to go out in nature. I want to use nature as my medicine. And that's what I do. I think about family. I have to. Like, I have 3 beautiful grandkids.
That's
Beautiful grandkids, and I mean, I love them dearly. Like I always say, I love them infinity and infinity beyond.
She always has to get the laugh.
Right, get that in there. But it's like I have 2 phenomenal daughters. She's the oldest, and I have a youngest daughter who's a RN. And, just the family. Family can help you get through anything.
They can.
You know what I
That's a
mean?
huge point.
Yes.
And here's what I say for people who, if you're isolated or if you don't feel like you have support of your family, or sometimes maybe your family is a large source of your pain.
Mm-hmm.
I feel really bad for people in those situations.
Mhm.
And what I would tell you is you have to find a way to find the thing you're fighting for. And we ask people all the time, who do you love? And almost nobody ever lists themselves.
That's why I talk about self-love.
Ooh,
And I think
wow.
it's a big
That's-
thing. How long before you go down that list? How many people would you list before you list you?
Oh my gosh.
And I'm guilty of that too, because I'm
Yes.
always doing stuff for others. And here's the thing about it is, how long does it take to get to you? But if there's no you, how can you do anything for any of
Right.
these other people? So you got to find a reason to fight. I remember, I touched on being homeless briefly. I remember, you talked about words and you talked about the setting your mindset.
Mm-hmm.
I remember deciding the adjectives I wanted. That was like a life-changing moment for me because I decided what words I wanted to be described as.
Yeah.
And it was a life changer for me because for the most part, I've done a pretty good job. Well, it's still working. I'm a work in progress, but
I think we all are.
yeah, but at least I
No
own
one's
it,
perfect.
right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
all own
Hey,
it.
A lot of
we
people
all
own
have
it.
one's
something.
perfect, yeah.
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 But I remember picking certain words and being like, okay, if that's the word I want people to use, what do I have to do to embody that?
Right.
Right? And one of these things about health crises is you have to see that the crisis exists. Then you have to start looking for an answer. Like we talked about the opioid crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It's a crisis and we're almost silent about it.
Well, let me touch back on family though, because you have mentioned family. So
Mhm.
so think of this dynamic here. Okay, you have Somebody who's a cancer patient, they're on chemotherapy. Everybody holds around them, adores them, showers them with love, makes sure every step of the way they're cared for. Somebody struggling with addiction in family, nobody wants them around. They want them at the treatment center. They don't want them in their house.
Or pretend it's not happening, or push them away, or like don't let it happen with other people, right?
Right. But in regards
That's
to
a
what
good
we
point,
discussed,
though.
right?
Yes, that's a good point.
Wow.
And
I didn't
Yeah.
think about that.
even a
That's
step,
true.
I'll even give you a step further, because I think there's lots of people fighting addiction, right?
Mhm.
It's exactly the same with mental health.
Mhm.
Because when someone in your house is struggling, and I'm a believer that depression is normal. I think we should just look at that as everybody gets depressed part of the time. You're going to have some depression.
It's human nature. I
It's human
believe.
nature.
Right.
And if you're paying attention to the world and see injustice around you, if some of that doesn't make you feel dark or upset, now there's levels to it, obviously.
Yes.
Clinical
Right.
depression is a different thing.
Mhm.
But people walk away. And you got to learn, even in your own family, who are the people that who can hold space for me?
Yeah.
And am I in position to hold space for you, right? Like, do I have that space or the strength to sit with you in it? Because so often, when someone gets quiet, leave them alone. When people are having mental health moments, I feel like sometimes we abandon them and leave them alone, like you said, almost of addiction. And I think that's part of what leads to people's addiction. Is all of a sudden, we've now isolated them in their own home,
Right.
right? Then they become addicted, or they fill that void with something else. And now we're even almost like, we like double down our frustration or our anger on people. And instead of grabbing those people and pulling them in, which is probably what they needed most,
Of course.
we go, ooh, you need to go somewhere.
Right.
He just stole
Right.
$30 out of my wallet, or
Right.
Yeah.
he busted into my safe, and
Yep.
When it's
Yeah,
actually a
he's-
sickness, you know what I mean?
It is.
It's a sickness, and support is everything. No matter whether it's, blood family or family that's, not blood, because it defines how do you define family? Some people, family is not their bloodline.
Mhm.
Family is just people that they're around or make them feel
that's
wanted.
true too.
You know what I mean? But it's sad that you have to think that way and push somebody away, because sometimes you think you're abandoning them, but you're not helping. And then they go down that spiral, that tunnel, because they felt like they were alone. Nobody loved them anymore. It's like, oh, my own family doesn't love me, or my friends doesn't love me. So they just go out of control and they don't know what to do. That's the sad part. A lot of people, they're in that situation because they don't know what to do, because no one took the time to love them.
Well, it's not even just that. It's just conversation, like just talking. Like,
Talking about it.
like I just, even in my own space, like if I notice a friend is just being quiet or silent or we're out or whatever, it's like I know something's up.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna ask you. You don't have to tell me right now.
Right.
But I'm letting you know that I'm sitting right here and ready for you when you want to say something, because that's the thing too. It's like I'm here to. You can talk to me.
Right.
And not everybody's like that, and we don't have that for everybody. But there's other alternatives. There's journaling. Like a lot of my things, and I'm kind of going off a little bit of subject, but like one of my biggest issues for myself is that I was always in this like high stress kind of moment, like because I had such a high stress job, and I would do this behavior where I just wake up, check my email, see what's happening, whatever.
Robotic. Gotta do this.
But then it puts me in a mood like, oh my gosh, I got to respond to this email, even though it's like 6 a.m. And I'm
Right.
like, I got to get it done. But why?
Right.
So the moment I started switching, like putting boundaries and switching some of my behavior, like I was telling you guys, like I just get up in the morning now, I set my alarm at 5 o'clock, and I will just, because I know everybody else in my house starts waking up at a certain time, I just get up, I go downstairs, I might read something, or I might just sit and drink coffee in the dark, because I just sit with myself, and I'm like, I don't need to check. I don't even look at my phone, because my thing is, these emails can wait. If there's an emergency, somebody's going to be coming to my door,
Right.
like a police officer or something, but it's like, God forbid. But I'm like, you have to just breathe. And it's honestly, that has just changed my, like, stop being stressed at work. And I just stopped like having just these moments. I knew that like when my kids would get up, breakfast, we do it at this time. But it's like, once you're up, I've already had my moment of like Zen. So now I'm like, what do you want?
Well, that's almost a different way of meditation, right?
It
is. There's many different ways you can meditate with your eyes open.
That's true. I mean, why do we feel like, though, just think about this a moment. Why do we feel like we always have to answer an email immediately or a text or
it's the
no matter what time it is?
perfectionism.
Yeah.
It is.
It's this
Oh my
concept in
gosh.
the modern world that we all have to be on the clock all the time and that we have to be able to fix all the problems.
Right.
Right.
And I think the first part we have to realize is we can't fix all the problems.
No.
There's always going to be problems.
Exactly.
And the other part is I cannot be 100% productive every moment of every day. That's not productive for my health.
Exactly.
Right? Like,
Right.
and I think that's part of it too, is we have this, we've decided that work is a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week, 365-day a year, and 366 on a leap year. Like we don't even take a day off if it's an extra day.
Exactly.
And
100%.
we've decided from the minute you get up, you better be on something so that you can show other people that you made progress. And it's like that time you take in the morning to drink your coffee.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's your progress.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's your peace. That time you meditate.
You reprogram yourself. See, our brains are super computers, but we have this society, and I'm just going to say it. There's a lot of nefarious individuals in it, out for profit. And if you look at the opioid crisis, Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family, they're elitists. They're right up there where they're for-profit driven. And when you live in a society like that, everything is so fast-paced, high-paced, high stimulation. And you have to figure out as a person, what am I going to do to slow myself down? And the main thing to do is what you're doing. And in that quiet space, what you're literally doing is raising your vibration and lowering your frequency. And the level of focus I think you're able to obtain in that space has got you to accomplish more in shorter periods of time, probably, right?
Absolutely. That's literally what it does. It makes me so much more productive. But then also like in those moments where I used to get like stressed out about certain things, I'm like, okay, well, here we are. You know, now I'm fine.
And I know you've also talked about, you and I have talked about this, is the positive impact that's had on your time with your children.
Yep.
Like how it's brought you, like maybe you could touch on that for a minute for people listening, like the way that helps you reconnect with your kids. Because sometimes people feel like taking that moment is selfish, right? But if it empowers you to be in a better space to reach and meet those kids.
No, that's why. And that's why I do it, because it's like when they get up, it's like I'm already ready to start the day with them. Even if it's like I have to make 30 things for breakfast or something wrong, I'm able to handle like situations that used to be like, I'd be like, well, I don't care, just eat this, you know, whatever, where I'm like, I just talk. And it's just like, it just puts me in a calmer spot. Like I don't even like look at news in the morning. I just wait.
It's good.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it's like, for me, I want to get up and, like you said, recharging. And that's actually a really good word. I didn't even think about that. But it's like, it's just me recharging my brain, and it just makes me a better person for the rest of the day.
You're reprogramming your neural pathways.
Yeah.
You're teaching your body, because you've been programmed to see things a certain way from a very high stress world that we live in. And so you have to deprogram that yourself. You have to like unlearn certain things, get rid of certain habits. And because we're all about repetition and habit forming. As soon as you do that and you create new habits, better habits that are more beneficial to your overall mental health, you start to emanate with a different glow, a different aura about yourself.
Antonio, do you teach your daughter about what you're doing?
She had the benefit of watching me like in meditation poses before, like when she would come visit me, because I'm basically like the weekend dad. Now she's 20.
Right.
Boyfriend,
but still,
makeup artist, works at Disneyland. She don't have that much time for daddy, but she would
But you're
see
still
me,
important in her life, though.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course, because I developed the relationship with her where we're always going to have open communication.
Right.
And I can be your best friend, but I'm still your dad.
That's right.
But I love you unconditionally, and you can tell me anything. And that is so pivotal for a girl to
Oh,
be able
yes.
and I've watched it in her life, how the relationship we had, and she has a great relationship with her mom and a wonderful family unit with her mom.
Right.
But the relationship we had helped her with her career choices. Like at 15, she knew she wanted to be a makeup artist.
Mm,
You know? So now she's 20 and she's been doing makeup for 5 years.
right.
She went to EDC on her own, just putting herself out there. She has a boyfriend that, I mean, any dad would be proud of her to have.
Oh, that's
And this is a
great.
boyfriend she's had since high school.
So you didn't have to meet him at the door and say, who are you?
Right. or all these different dudes coming in and, oh, this is your boyfriend this month, right?
Well, and I'll, like, as a parent, like, that's one of the things. Like, I got 5 kids.
Oh, wow.
I love my kids. And I have 2 biological. I adopted 2 as adults. You know, the one I lost. So I tell people all the time, like, you think you have more time. That's the biggest crime. It's the biggest lie we tell ourselves. And it also will undermine your mental health is you think you have more time.
Right.
You better steal that moment today. That conversation with your daughter, right?
Yeah.
You better steal that moment today to take the break in the morning, like Jada talked about, to heal yourself, to ground yourself. You better take that moment, like Dot talked about, of like, I'm going to have to be a warrior for this. I'm fighting for taking that mental check. What am I grateful for? I'm grateful for these grandchildren. I'm grateful for my daughters. Right? Like for me, man, I'm grateful for my kids every single day.
Yeah.
It's the greatest gift.
No matter what age they are.
Bottom, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so notably, the writer's intent with Heartfelt is to motivate our youth by inspiring them to believe in themselves, imploring them to have faith in their abilities to create a better world. He urges them to imagine a world devoid of pollution, money, corruption, war, poverty, homelessness, and starvation. Then he encourages them to take action on ridding the world of such things aforementioned, elevating their consciousness and moving through the world with feelings of gratitude, appreciation, empathy, kindness, love, compassion, and forgiveness. When in pursuit of a better world, we must seek higher ground, having the willingness to strive for a higher state of consciousness. It's a battle for consciousness in this world. We have different layers of consciousness that are always under attack. But if you change and you feel grateful in a moment, you feel empathy, you appreciate everything. These are these elevated emotions that connect with the universe through your thoughts. So that is what's going to emanate in your life, because the universe wants to reward us abundantly. But if there's war going on and poverty, homelessness, all these different things in your mind, that's all you're going to really see.
Right.
And how are you going to make a difference in those things if you're not a grateful person, a loving person, a compassionate person?
Yeah, and on that note, to kind of wrap up, Antonio, because
Yeah.
we've covered a lot of stuff. I'd love for all of us, because you started it. So I'd love to go around and come back to you, because I want to give you the last word.
Okay.
Out of respect, because you've really done a great job.
Oh, yes.
But I would love for a
Very
moment,
deep conversation.
if we could all maybe just throw out a brief statement, almost a little bit like that, and then we'll come back to you so that you can wrap us up of the mental health side of this, from a health side. What is it that you wish people knew? What if we could give the audience a gift if you were talking to your kids or if you're talking to the people you love? And I'll go first. Like my example would be, I would say, first of all, for anybody listening, thank you for the kindness and the willingness to listen and share. And may we continue this conversation, because that's where you will be empowered the most. And I'll learn the most from you, is if you're willing to share your thoughts with us through our social medias and our stuff, because I want to hear your voice and I want to learn from you. And then what I would say is, know that you're loved. Know that you're not alone. Know that you're valued. Doesn't matter what people did to you along the way. Most of that was not your fault. That was something other people did out of their own pain. So for your mental health, let that go, because you deserve to live a better, happy, healthier life. But it starts with little moments of gratitude. Like Antonio said, for me, it starts with, what do you love? What do you dream of? And then how can you make the space around you a little brighter, a little better today? Just a little act. Make the space around you better. I use this term, be the lighthouse in the dark, right? Be a safe place where other people know the light's coming from. Jada, how about you?
That's beautiful.
That is. Wow. Oh my.
No, I would just say take a moment and just take everything in, because I feel like some of us are people pleasers. Some of us want to do things to make other people happy and then forget about themselves. So for me, I would say, I think people should just take a minute, take a breath. All of those things will still be there 5 minutes later, and just know that, just be there for yourself, because that's very important.
Right. I would say self-love. You have to have self-love. Know that you are enough, no matter what people tell you. And also, just know that you're not alone, and ask for help if you need help. Don't be ashamed to ask for something that you need. Everyone deserves to be happy, no matter who they are, where they come from. Everyone deserves to be happy. Always use your voice and ask for help if you need it. Because don't look at that as if, I don't want to ask for help because this person is going to think of this of me, or think that I'm not, a good person or whatever. But just be yourself, and I'm grateful for the show, because we learn a lot. We don't know everything, but we're learning a lot. And people like Antonio came here to sit with us and share his journey and beliefs and expertise, and we appreciate it. So be appreciative about what others can do for you. That's what I would say.
That is wonderful. Wonderful. What I would say, I want to use a famous Rumi quote.
Mm-hmm.
You are the mirror and the reflection, right? We are all one. Small acts of kindness have a ripple effect all around the world. Have that conversation with a friend who's down. Be a mentor to someone. Be a loving and caring friend. Always try to approach people with compassion on your heart and uplift them with words of encouragement. And, because in the end, what did he say? Never mind. That's okay. But in the end, we're all interconnected in this interconnected universe, and we're all come from one prime source.
And for all of you watching, thank you for being part of Lovesick. This is about sharing love, loving people through the moments of sickness. And that's not just physical, that's mental, that's emotional. Make the space for each other. We're here to make space for you and to experience each other. And we thank you very much, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, Antonio.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Antonio, for
Appreciate
giving
it.
us that light.